Parkside at Home. My name is Deborah.
And my name is Matt, and very excited that you are joining us here today, and especially if it's your first time, welcome.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you. We would love to get to know you. We would love it if you would go to parkside.life/connect. We have an online connection card that you can fill out there. I promise we're not going to hound you and email you all the time. We just want to say thanks so much for being here and to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, and really the whole reason we want to do that is because we want to build bridges between people and Jesus, and your people, and we love Jesus, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we're just so thankful to be able to have the opportunity to connect with you week in, week out through this platform, but we would also love for you to join us in person sometime here at the Community Center.
Yeah, we meet here on Sunday mornings at 10:30 at the Sterling Community Center, and we would love to just see you face to face and get to know you if you're local, or if you're visiting from out of town, we would love to say hi and just to get to meet you.
Yeah, you are always welcome here because, as we always say, whether you're watching online or you're here in person, you are family, right? And we want to get to hang out.
Yeah.
One of the ways, actually, we're going to be able to hang out is coming up here in just a couple weeks, Easter.
Yeah.
And we have
It's hard to believe.
I know. It's really hard to believe that it's already here. It's spring, but that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
We have our Easter egg hunt, actually, coming up. And it's going to be a really fun time just down the street here from the Community Center at the Sterling Athletic Fields from 10 to 11:30. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah, tons of fun. Candy, Easter egg hunt.
Yes.
The Easter bunny might be making an appearance from what I've heard. I've heard the rumor. I don't know. He's a busy guy, so we'll see if he shows up. But we would love to have you join us for that on that Saturday. And then the next day, Sunday, is Easter Sunday, and we love Easter Sunday just because it's such a fun time and just an exciting time to be reminded specifically of what we celebrate as Christians, as believers. And so we would love for you to join us. We are going to hang out. We're going to maybe have some food together.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
It's going to be a ton of fun. But more importantly, we're going to celebrate the gospel together. And so we're really looking forward to that. And we would love to have you join us for that.
Yeah, so be it on Saturday for the Easter egg hunt or Sunday for our Easter service. We're just, again, very excited to be able to have that experience together and celebrate the gospel message as a community. And really, the only reason that we're even able to do things like the Easter egg hunt, come here on a week in, week out basis, is because of you and your generosity. So thank you for all the ways that you've been partnering with us to help us build bridges between people and Jesus.
Yeah, so thank you so much. We thank you for your prayers. We thank you for financial support if you've given in that way. And if you would like to do that, if you feel like the Lord is leading you to do that, you can go to parkside.life/give and give safely and securely online. But just know we're so grateful for that. And we could not do, like Matt said, we could not do what we have done in the last several years without you guys and your partnership with us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, so we've been in this series, A Story to Tell, for a few weeks now, and it's been fantastic learning about all the ways that God not only can use our stories, but how He has given us that ultimate story, right, to be able to share with others.
So we're so thankful that you're here once again. Interact with us. We would love to know, if you heard something that you had feedback on, or you man, that was really helpful for me. Yeah. Feel free to leave a comment or a like or send us a message. We would love to hear from you. So let's jump in.
Well, good morning. So glad that you're here. Excited to wrap up our conversation of your story. Or no, it says a story to tell. I forgot it for a second. A story to tell, but it's all about the stories that take place in our life. We talked about our story and how important that is. We talked about how important their story is. And today we're going to talk about how important His story is. And of course, that His is Jesus. As we're on the heels of the Easter season, we're a couple weeks out. We start our Easter series next week, Palm Sunday. I think it's really important for us to understand, if we're talking about building bridges between people and Jesus, right, to go and make disciples, it's important that we talk about how the gospel intersects all that stuff. Because it's cool to know someone's story. It's great. It's awesome. It's important for us to let other people know our story, but we have to connect those two things to Jesus. We have to. And in a moment of transparency, I just want to be honest with you guys and say, these last few weeks have been incredibly personal to me. I think they've probably been the most personal series that we've done as a church. I've thought deeply about what this has meant for me, not just in preparation or content, to make sure that we're saying the right things, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about introspectively processing what's been going on. And it's not just because of the content. It's not just because of where God is leading us. It's found its interesting place in my life at this particular moment, especially when I start thinking about my story. And I told you guys a couple weeks ago, like, stories are incredibly important. I think as a society, throughout human history, stories have played an important part, and then I value good story. For me, like, watching TV or watching movies isn't just a way to waste time. Like, I don't typically veg out watching TV. Some of it I do because it's just like mindless, like Parks and Rec, mindless. It's great, just makes me laugh. But I enjoy good storytelling, so TV and movies is a great way for me to do that. Like, I enjoy good storytelling, so it's a hobby for me. But also, like, the impact of story and how much it means to me personally, but also I got to spend some time with someone who helped shape my story a couple weeks ago. I told some of you guys, like, Deborah and I and Annabeth went to Kansas City so Annabeth could attend a conference for students who were trying to figure out how to pray for and in their schools, and it was such a great time. But also had a chance to spend some time with my youth pastor who lives out in Kansas City. And here's actually a picture that I want to show you guys that we took out in Kansas City. So this is Gary and his wife, Jess. And their kids aren't pictured in the picture because we didn't want to make room for them. It was fine. We took a picture with just them. It's great. But this is Gary. He was my youth pastor from the time that I was 12 until probably 15 or so, like 14, 15 in that range. So he got me, like, in the beginning of middle school, all the way through middle school. Interesting time in my life. And then kind of starting high school. And so he met me when I was 12, and we looked a lot different then. And I don't think it's fair to show you how we look now. I think you should see how we looked then. So here's a picture of when we met. Yeah, impressed, aren't you? Yeah. All you young people now, yeah, things change as you get older. So get used to it. So this was Gary and I, two separate pictures, but the same trip. We were on a mission trip somewhere. I don't know where, because we went on a lot of different mission trips all over the place. But yeah, if that picture's if it's still up there, it can go away now, so you guys can stop judging me. And I had less hair then, but it was by choice. It is not a choice now. So anyways, I met Gary then, and this is someone that came into my life at a really pivotal time. My parents had not yet gotten divorced, but it was coming. It was imminent. It felt that way, at least to me. Dad wasn't a particularly present part of my life, and he certainly was not spiritually present at all. And to have a father-type figure to come in and push me towards discipleship was incredibly important. In fact, I think Gary was the first person in my life that I really think intentionally lived out the Great Commission for me. When I think about the meaning of the Great Commission, like, therefore go and make disciples, like, he's the person that sticks out in my mind as the first person to really intentionally live that out. And that whole therefore go, we really lived that out because we would go all the time. And he would go out of his way to make sure that I was cared for and loved on and poured into, even as a really annoying middle school student. And I was a really annoying middle school student. And even since then, there's been different seasons, and in different ways, Gary has continued to be a disciple maker in my life. He knows my story. He helped shape my story. And over the years, he's opened up to me. He's told me some things about his life. I've been able to walk through some great and difficult seasons with him and his life as our relationship changed. And so I know his story really well. But most importantly, and where I want to spend some time today talking about, is he showed me the connection between his story and my story and connected it to the life of Jesus. And like I said, I've given this a lot of thought over the last few weeks, and I've asked myself, excuse me, what is it about the relationship that Gary and I had, especially then, but even continued throughout the course of our time together, even over great distances, like literally half the country. What is it about that relationship that has created space for me to grow as a disciple, created space for the influence that he's had in my life? Like, what are the distinctive points that makes that relationship so important to me? And a few things kind of rose to the top, kind of came to mind really quickly, and I want to share those with you. And this isn't a message about Gary, right? and he would be mortified if he knew we were talking about this. I actually had a dream this week that he just showed up, like just out of the blue, and I was like, ugh, because like he would hate it if he knew we were talking about this. And so I'm going to find out this week if he actually ever watches any of our services, because he'll call me and say, what were you thinking? A few things that came to mind. One, Gary got to know me. He took the time intentionally to get to know me, and we did it in a lot of different ways. We played golf at the par 3 off 385, where I nearly killed a woman with a stray shot. We played pickup games of basketball in our church gym all the time. I may not look like it now, but I used to be a hooper, right? I actually nearly lost a pinky playing basketball in that gym just a mile and a half down the road. Stop looking at me like that, Jordan. I did play basketball, and I was actually decent at one time. But one of the things I remember most is eating peanut butter milkshakes at the top clock at the corner of Washington and Easley Bridge Road. And if you're from like this area, you know, like, and SWU students, you'll pass by on your way home. There's 2 clocks sits right next to one another. There used to be a strip club next door, but now it's a church. The redeeming value of God, right? That happened. It was called Diamonds. Now it's CCI, Anyways, should have taken that medicine before church. This is what happens when I've been alone all week. Like, my family's been away, and I've been by myself all week long. So, like, I just need the social interaction. So anyways, the top clock, there's 2 clocks that sit literally right next to one another. And, like, you will separate families depending on which clock you go to. And I and my family, they don't really care. We are top clock people. I don't know why. We just are. But Gary and I would sit at the top clock, and we would eat peanut butter milkshakes. Do you eat milkshakes or drink milkshakes? This is a debate for another time. We consumed milkshakes together. I was going to say share milkshakes, but that sounded really weird. But anyways, we would sit at the top clock and just share life together and have deep conversations that helped form my life, where I was able to ask really important questions, and sometimes we were just there together, but over those kind of things, playing golf, living life together, consuming milkshakes together, he got to know me. Here's the second thing that really stuck out to me. He didn't pretend to know everything. I mean, Gary was an authority figure in my life. He was a pastor. He was a mentor. And over the years, he became a father figure in my life. He's the guy I call every Father's Day to say, hey, happy Father's Day. Thanks for everything. He has that place in my life, but he never pretended to know everything. And over the course of almost 3 decades of relationships, Gary and I have had a ton of conversations about all kinds of different things, conversations that have helped shape who I am as a person. And there's so much value in the wisdom that he shared with me, but I've also found value in the times where he's looked at me and said, I don't know. We're going to have to think about this, or I'm going to have to get back to you. I'm going to have to find out. I don't know. And it could be about deeply spiritual things or just things about the world. I always appreciated when him as an adult, somebody I looked up to, didn't look at me and give me some kind of fluff answer, or give me some kind of like answer that I knew that was not fully thought out, or maybe not even 100% true, just to keep up the facade of a mentor or a father figure or an adult in my life. We've talked about life and faith and ministry and marriage, integrity, parenting, leadership. We've talked about all kinds of things. And in those conversations, he never once led me to think that he had all the answers. And he didn't lead me to expect to find all the answers in those conversations. And I found comfort in the fact that he didn't know everything, but we could explore and discover the answers together. I found that to be incredibly refreshing. Because I don't know about you, like when I feel like someone is just talking to appear like they know what they're talking about, it is really easy to see through it, and they lose all credibility with me. Third thing, Gary didn't hide his flaws behind his faith, and he also allowed me to be flawed. We've touched on this topic a couple times. Like, one other way that we say this, we communicate this concept is one of the number one reasons that people don't go to church is because they know someone who does. And one of the biggest missteps of the church is that we pretend like we don't mess up. We pretend like we've got everything figured out. And like I said, I think this might be one of the most important realities of my relationship with Gary that has helped shape my life as he's connected my story, his story, with the story of Jesus. And I think we can be in really meaningful relationships for just a few days, and we see flaws within them. It seems like such a long time ago, because it was a long time ago when I was like in the dating world. And like, for those of you who are still figuring that out, I'm sorry. It's rough. I don't want to go back to it, right? But one of the things I do remember is like you start a relationship with someone, and it doesn't have to be romantic, but like you just get to know someone and you get like a month in and you already start to see like their imperfections. The things that they do that you're like, that doesn't make any sense, or that gets on their nerves. It doesn't really take that long. But after 30 years, you don't just see the flaws. You've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. You've seen people on their worst days and their bad days. And over the years, Gary and I have had lots of moments where we've been honest with one another and owned up to the moments that we're not proud of. And those moments are incredibly important to me. But I think taking that thought a step further, Gary gave me space and margin to allow me to be in process. I never felt like Gary expected me to be further along than I was. I think he pushed me a step or two further than I was comfortable with, but I'll put it like this. He never expected a middle school boy to act like anything other than a middle school boy. And when I got to be a freshman in high school, he expected me to act like a freshman in high school. I could see, especially as I got older, like, this dude is not perfect. And he also said, like, I don't expect you to be perfect. My earliest memory of this concept is my favorite. Just a quick story. We were sitting together at the McDonald's over by Greenville Memorial High School. And if you're from around here, like if you've been to that McDonald's, you know that McDonald's used to have a massive aquarium in the middle of a McDonald's, which made it the coolest McDonald's that has ever existed. It no longer has that. I don't know whose decision that was, but they should be beat with a fry pan. I don't know. What's funny is you should hear the thoughts that went through my head. We were sitting there talking, and we were both eating Big Macs, which is embarrassing in and of itself. But we were having some kind of conversation, and he was giving me a hard time about something. And like, do you know, especially when you're a kid, like you have this guard that is up, like where there are things that you will say in front of your friends at school that you would never say in front of your parents, right? And things that you would say or do in front of your friends at home that you would never say in front of your youth pastor. Well, in a moment where my brain went blank, that guard went away, and I gave Gary the middle finger in the middle of McDonald's. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. And I was preparing for the disappointed conversation. Not the, I can't believe you did that. It was like, I'm really disappointed, which is so much worse. So much worse. And instead, I got, come on, man. And we went back to eating our Big Macs. I think initially, I was like, whew, I got away with it. Like, okay, he now knows something about me that he didn't know before, but I got away with it because I didn't really get in trouble. And I think what was really happening in that moment was grace. That's not okay. You know you shouldn't do that, but you know you shouldn't do that, so I'm not going to beat you up about it. I think he was allowing me space to be flawed, but also challenged me to live a better way. Those are some of the thoughts I've had as we've processed these stories that we've been talking about over the last few weeks. This is an important person in my life that has helped shape who I am, that has lived out these things that we've talked about, and he's done it over a tremendous amount of time. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I haven't always recognized it, but it's exactly what we've been talking about. Gary listened to my story, he shared his story, and he helped me connect the dots to the story of the gospel, the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ. And I think it lays out a little bit of a template for how we can connect with people's stories, our stories, and connect them to the story of Jesus. I also think it's reflective of the gospel itself. So using that as a template, like what are some takeaways that we can have today? Like moving forward as we continue to have conversations and have authentic, transparent, real, intentional relationship with people in our life. A couple things I think we can take away as we transition into how we can impact this or how this impacts our life, how we can apply it to our lives. First of all, we need to learn what they need. We need to learn what people need. The gospel becomes more relevant when it is understood through the lens of what people really need. Like if you look at the way Jesus operated, it wasn't just this blanket statement. It wasn't this template that was used over and over. It was custom fit to what someone needed in the moment. Jesus was a healer, a provider, a defender. He was all those things. He wasn't just one of those things. The impact of who he was is that he understood who he was talking to in the moment and custom fit the conversation and the communication to what those people needed. Jesus can meet every person exactly where they are. So how can we connect to who Jesus is where they are unless we get to know them? Think about that. Like if Jesus takes the steps to get to know people where they are, exactly where they are, nothing more, nothing less, nothing else, then that's what we should do. But how can we do that if we don't actually know what they need? Which means we cannot rush the process. I think so many times in our life, like we think of things so linearly, so formulaic, and it's like, I gotta do this, this, and this, and it's gotta be in this time frame. But look, you can't get to know people in one conversation. You can't get to know people in one interaction. We know this is a base of a human relationship. It takes time. This is also a mix of understanding human nature and the state of culture. These are important factors that we don't always consider, especially in these settings when people like me tell you, hey, you need to reach people with the gospel and you need to do it now. It takes out, it makes those statements in vacuums when we don't take into consideration human nature and building trust and rapport with people takes time because we are all kind of at a default state of at least skepticism, if not straight mistrust, and also take into consideration the state of culture. Things are not the same as they used to be. Do you understand like the amount of voices that we allow into our lives that influence us or they try to influence us every single day? Literally thousands and thousands of voices that speak into our life, from advertising to media to social media to like literally when you leave here today, between now and when you get home, if you're listening to the radio, if you're driving by billboards, if you're not driving, hopefully, and you're flicking through social media, thousands of voices in a single day that tell you different things. Buy this, do this, think this, believe this, say this, perceive it this way. The amount of influence that we have in our life is so much different than it used to be. And so many of those voices are telling us things that are counterintuitive to the gospel. So if we're trying to speak life and truth into someone's life, like that's our competition. And the thing that helps us beat that competition is determination and time. Look at the way God set up the family. Like the way that our family works and the way most families work, like you've got your children for almost 2 decades before they fly the nest and start becoming what they think is an adult. My child already thinks she's an adult. She came in like with coffee today. You're grounded. I mean, that's the kind of influence that we're having over our own children. It literally takes almost 20 years for you to like give them what they need just to survive. We can't have one conversation or 2 conversations or just over a few months to feel like we're going to have enough influence to counteract what's going on in the world. We have to pay attention to culture. We cannot rush this process. And we don't have to do it all at once. It takes time. We see in the gospel these little snapshots of Jesus' life and his interactions, and the Bible is incredible. Obviously, like I believe every word, like it's true, it's there for us. But one of the things that makes it more difficult is that we see it in these little snapshots. This story, this interaction, this thing happened, and we don't always get, or rarely do we get the connective tissue. We kind of have to fill in the gaps sometimes. And we look for these particular moments that kind of give us an idea of the best way to live. Sometimes it helps to kind of read between the lines a little bit. I think when it comes to living out this truth, to learning what people actually need, we need to look at the totality of the Gospels and see how Jesus interacted with the disciples to get the best idea. Compiling the Gospels together and looking at Jesus over the course of time gives us the best look at what authentic intentional relationships look like. Jesus lived life with them. He shared meals with them. They traveled together. They worked together. They were together all the time. And like I said, we get these little moments where we see these clear pictures of Jesus' interaction with them. But I think sometimes we need to take a step back and look at things as a whole. And one of those examples that I absolutely love to death is Jesus' relationship with Peter. And Peter is this really interesting character that we actually get a lot of information about throughout the Gospels and beyond. Peter desperately wanted to be Jesus' ride or die. Like, he wanted to be with Jesus, beside Jesus, on the front lines of everything they did. He worked so hard to get Jesus' approval and to see him like he felt like he should be seen. Does that make sense? He wanted Jesus like, I'm your dude. Whatever you need, I am there. You can count on me. He was eager. He wanted to be on the cutting edge of what Jesus was doing. This is the guy that wanted to walk on water. Like, I'm your guy. If you can do it, I can do it. Just call me out. I will come out to you. He wanted to make it clear when Jesus was washing other people's feet, like, whoa, like, I am not worthy to have you wash my feet because I understand who you are better than everybody else. I don't think it was a haughty or like prideful thing. I just think he was all in for Jesus. But later in that same conversation, like as they're reclining at the table, they had spent some time together, there was this interesting interaction where Jesus kind of drops this bomb on the disciples and says, one of you is going to betray me. Could you imagine the defenses that went up in that moment? Like, whoa, like, who is it? Peter's like, it is not me. It is absolutely not me. And Jesus calls him out and says, no, it's not you, but you are going to deny me. You're not going to betray me, but you are going to deny me. Go on just a couple hours. They're in the garden. Judas betrays Jesus. The guards come to arrest, and Peter literally is the guy to draw his sword, and he cuts off a dude's ear. It's like, you are not getting to him. This is my guy. This is not going down. And Jesus picks up the ear, puts it back on, which always is weird to me. And he's arrested. He's taken. He's beaten. And Peter is standing outside and in a matter of moments denies Jesus 3 times. 3 times he was asked, aren't you one of the ones with Jesus? Nope, not me. That is absolutely not me. And then in some translations it says he actually uses a curse word almost to deny Jesus. This guy that was Jesus ride or die, right? I'm down for whatever. I'm willing to cut off a dude's ear to make sure you're okay. Leaves him in the dust. Says, I don't know this guy. Fast forward a few days later. This is after Jesus had been crucified, resurrected, and he had appeared to the disciples. They were sitting down on the shoreline having breakfast, and Jesus brings up the elephant in the room. He's sitting across from Peter, and he asks Peter, do you love me? He actually asked the question 3 times. 3 times he was denied. 3 times he restores Peter. Now, I've always found it interesting, that parallel. He denied Jesus 3 times. Jesus restores Peter 3 times. I think it's a beautiful snapshot of Jesus knowing exactly what Peter needed. Because he knew him. They had spent time together. They had done life together. I don't think Jesus had this supernatural knowledge of Peter. I think it wasn't out of his divinity, it was out of his humanity because they had spent so much time together. What about the people in your life that God's calling you to disciple, to love on, to help point towards Him, to share the life-changing gospel truth to? Are you getting to know them? Are you learning what they need? Second thing, you don't have to have all the answers. This is a rare moment where I, as one of your pastors, get to let you off the hook. Sometimes I feel like it's our responsibility, our job is to challenge you, to push you, all right, to help you feel a little uncomfortable. This is a time where I'm going to let you off the hook a little bit, but just a little bit. I think for most of us, even in my own life, where a lot of anxiety comes in is we feel the pressure to have all the answers, that we need to know everything about everything in order to share life-changing gospel truth with people. We feel like we have to have the answer to every single question that they could possibly ask. And we feel inadequate to help people process because we don't have all the knowledge. Look, I say this with no pride whatsoever because it barely happened, right? I have 2 Bible degrees and I still feel inadequate, right? So if there's a few of us in the room that have professional, formal training to share the gospel with people, Bible degrees, and I can tell you we all have moments where we feel inadequate to answer all the questions. Do you know why? Because it's impossible to answer all the questions. There's too many circumstances, there's too many nuances. Like, I'm telling you, one of the funniest things about being a youth pastor is when some kid would hit you out of left field with a question you have never conceived of in your entire life, and you have to go, are you taking your meds? Because how does your brain work that you even thought of something like that? I know what it feels like to feel inadequate to answer all the questions, and sometimes I don't feel worthy to answer the question because I am also in process, and the process is messy. And these feelings can lead to atrophy, where we just feel stuck, but Scripture calls us to action. So how do we move from atrophy to action when we're feeling inadequate? One of my favorite passages reminds me of this call to action. Excuse me. And it's 1 Peter 3:15. And we've talked about this a lot over the last few weeks, but I'm just going to read it again. And it says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. That hope is the gospel of Jesus Christ, but do it with gentleness and respect. This is just one verse, but it is chock full of good teaching and things that we need to pay attention to. The thing I want to pay attention to in this moment is always be prepared. Those words right there, always be prepared. What is that? What action is that calling us to? I think it's, in this instance, about preparation that's both a state of mind and it's a feeling. It's a state of mind and it's a feeling. It's I'm always prepared. I feel ready. Like I'm in a relationship with Jesus. I have confidence in who I am and who's called me to be. I have assurance in the call that we have to go and make disciples. So I can do that because I trust God and I know that's what He's asked me to do and I'm going to honor Him. That's the feeling of ready. But there's also the state of mind that I'm doing the work to do my part to do the best I can to answer questions. I think what we're being called to is a prompt to learn. I think sometimes in our faith and just in the world, we've devalued learning. And let me tell you why I can speak on this. Because I was a terrible student. A terrible student. But as I get older and hopefully get a little bit wiser, I'm understanding that one of the responsibilities I have as a Christ follower is to never stop learning. Sometimes we have to put the work in ahead of time to be ready. And there are other places in the Scriptures that call us to learn. So it's not just this moment that we're talking about. I think all of Scripture calls us to learn. Romans 12:2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Matthew 22:37, love the Lord God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. Proverbs 1:5. Let the wise listen and add to their learning. Scripture calls us to learn. So if you want to be prepared to give an answer for the hope, the life-changing gospel in your life, you've got to spend time in the Word. You've got to learn from and about God. Look, no one expects you to know everything, but that's not an excuse to do nothing. You've got to learn. It's often overlooked, but learning is a critical aspect of our discipleship. But I will say, and this is where I stop letting you off the hook, and I put the pressure back on. There are a few things that you should absolutely know. You don't have to have all the answer, but I'm going to give you just a snapshot of some things that you should know so you are ready to give an answer for this hope that you have. And it's just a simple version of the gospel message. It's so funny because the gospel message, it's incredibly powerful in its implication. It literally will change your life for now and for eternity, but it's not difficult to explain. Sometimes it can be a lot to process, but it's not difficult to explain. So here's a very simple thing. And maybe if you're taking notes, take notes. If not, you can watch it online. First part, Jesus lived a perfect life as an example to us, but also paved the way for our atonement. Atonement is just a churchy word of like an exchange. Like we did wrong, and he did nothing wrong, and he kind of took the place for that. The other part, or the next part, is that we've all made choices that have put distance between us and God, and we cannot close that distance for ourselves. One of the ways we refer to that is sin. Like we do things, we knowingly make mistakes, we knowingly do wrong, and it creates distance between us and God, and we can't do anything on our own to close that distance. That's why we need atonement. And Jesus' death paid the debt for our sin once and for all. Once and for all our sin, and once and for all people. That's the thing that where we can't do it on our own, he does it for us. And his death, or his resurrection, defeated death and made it possible for every one of us to have a relationship with him both now and forever if we choose to. Those are the simple parts of the gospel. That's what all those books that are about Jesus kind of point to, that look, he's perfect, we've made mistakes, we need him, and he made a way through his death and resurrection for us to have a relationship with him. But just like any other relationship, it doesn't take complete or extensive knowledge of him to get started. I think sometimes people are like, man, if I knew more about Jesus, or if I could get some things figured out in my own life, we kind of make these caveats of like, if I could just put these things in place, then I could start a relationship with Jesus. And that's just not true. Like, we don't have to clean ourselves up or have this perfect situation. Like, sometimes when someone comes into your house, you're like, I got to get everything straightened up. Got to make it look nice. Well, Jesus is like, I don't care. I'll come in and help. Simply put, we don't have to know everything about Jesus to start a relationship with him. And that's something that we can communicate with people as we get to know them. We don't have to know all the answers, but those are some answers that are easy to know and that you should know. Finally, we have to be vulnerable. And this is a lot of our thinking that becomes very, very difficult, at least for me. Maybe you're better at this than I am. One of the analogies that Scripture uses to describe the tension between living how we want to live and living how we should live is described by living by the flesh and living by the Spirit. Living by the flesh is, I can do what I want to do. If I feel it, it's okay. If I feel like doing it, it's okay. But living by the Spirit is connecting to something that's bigger than us, that knows us, that is connected to absolute truth, and we live that way. Our flesh pulls us towards self-protection and selfish desires, and the Spirit pushes us towards making choices that honor God, that lead to the best possible life, if that makes sense. Avoiding being vulnerable or transparent is one of the most prevalent desires of the flesh. Our flesh tells us, don't let anyone in. If you don't let anyone in, if you don't show the deepest parts of you, you can't get hurt. It's self-protection. So I get it. And sometimes we look at being vulnerable as like, I want to keep everybody out. Like it's, like this Scrooge mentality. I just referenced Scrooge in the middle of spring or the start of spring, right? Like it's not, it's protection. I don't want to let anybody in because I don't want to get hurt. But when it comes to sharing our story, connecting to his story to their story, the enemy will lie to us and try to convince us that we should not be vulnerable. Oh, we want them to be vulnerable because that's how we're going to get to know them. That's how we're going to make the connection. But sometimes we're like, that's not for me. I don't need to do that. Because we think if people know what I've done, they will look at me differently. I will make Jesus look bad. This is what the enemy tells us. Like, he is crafty. He will tell us things that make so much sense. Like, that you're actually doing a good thing. Well, if I'm not honest, if I'm not fully vulnerable or fully transparent with someone, you're actually serving God better because you're not going to distract them away. When actually, that's exactly what someone needs. I can tell you right now, the world does not need another group of Christians that look like they have it all together, but are cracking behind the scenes. They need for us to be honest and say, look, we know the truth. We're trying to figure out how to live by the truth, but we still know it's the truth. I'm here to tell you that a messy but authentic version of your story reflects the beauty of the gospel way better than a polished, curated one does. God can do more with what looks like brokenness in your life. He can do way more than that, with that, than you just putting out the best versions or like the movie version of your life or the Instagram story version of your life. I'm not saying you've got to air all your dirty laundry. I'm not saying you got to put your business out in the streets. I'm not saying that, but I'm asking you, is your story, all of your story, on the altar? Is there any part of the story that you and God have created? Is there anything that you're saying, nope, that's just for me? Or are you looking at Jesus and saying, it's all there? Some of you guys know my story. And it's got its ups and downs. And Deborah and I were just talking about this a couple weeks ago where I had a conversation with someone and they're like, well, tell me your story. I told them parts of it. I didn't tell them everything because it wasn't the right time, but I'm willing to. I'm willing to tell that part of my story anytime because I'm not trying to hide it. It's not mine, it's the Lord's. What if the darkest parts of your story can be used to shine the brightest light? I think this is something Paul understood, and he conveyed it beautifully in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. For in you my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I will delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I mean, you can kind of interchange conceptually the idea of weakness with our story, because some of us, we feel like our past is where we are weak. But Paul's saying, look, the parts of you that you feel like they're the most broken, those are the parts that God can use for an incredible impact. One of the best ways you can honor God with your life and in relationship is to be open and transparent and vulnerable with other people. It's okay that you're not perfect, that you don't have it all together, that you've messed up. In fact, I think what Paul is telling us in the scripture is that it'll actually help. That's not an excuse to go out and live some kind of way and try to manufacture a story. But the life that you've lived as it sits now, it actually can help other people. So as we finish our time here, there's a simple question I just want to end our time with. Who is God leading you to disciple? Who is God leading you towards listening to their story, sharing your story, and then connecting it with his story? This is not a maybe or might question. Because if you love Jesus, if you claim that in your life, if you have a relationship with him, it's an is statement. You are being called to disciple someone in your life. You're being led to be a disciple that makes disciple. And in recent history, the evangelical church, like what they have told us, that what that means is your responsibility is to invite them to church. If you get them in the doors, like your responsibility to share the gospel with other people, invite them to church. And then the pastor, the production, the programming, we'll take care of the rest. We'll do that. All you got to do is invite them to church. That is not the gospel truth, guys. Look, I love it here. Bring them in. I want to meet them, have a good time. Community is incredibly important. But this is not it. This is a part of discipleship. This is not discipleship as a whole. Don't just get them here. It's not someone else's responsibility. I spent half this message telling you about how someone had a parental level influence in my life who was a vocational pastor, and not once did I mention a sermon, a class, a lesson, or a service. That is not where the influence that Gary had in my life came from. It was hanging out, doing life, peanut butter milkshakes. Those things have their place. Services, sermons, classes, they have their place, but the absolute best way to build bridges between people and Jesus is life on life. And not pastor life on someone else's life. You are no less qualified to disciple someone because you don't have a title or a degree or an education. Like, we all have a calling to make disciples. You may not feel qualified. I get you. I feel you. You may feel inadequate. I get it. I feel you. But that does not diminish the calling that you have if you love Jesus. Building bridges between people and Jesus happens around dinner tables, on pickleball courts, in coffee shops, and like I said, at the top clock, eating peanut butter milkshakes. Who is God leading you to disciple? You bow your heads and close your eyes. I want to do two things very quickly. One, I want you to take a moment to think about who God is calling you to disciple. Not if, not when, who. And look, I told you a couple weeks ago, like this conversation is timely, but its purpose is not to look at you at the end of this message and say, and you got to get him here for Easter Sunday. That is not our intention. Our intention is not that you get them here. The end goal of discipleship is not church attendance. It's a relationship with Jesus. So I want you to think about who it is, and then what you're going to do next. But I also want to take an opportunity, and look, I know we talk a lot in these settings, assuming that people are at a certain place in their relationship with Christ. But if that's not where you are today and you're thinking about that, like if you haven't made a decision to accept Jesus, but we talked about the gospel message this morning, I want to give you that opportunity today. I don't want to waste an opportunity. If you feel like the Lord is kind of drawing you in, and you could be like ready to make that decision, or you could just have questions. And we want to create space for that. So if you've got questions, or you're like you feel like that's something that you're interested in, or you want to talk more about, like I'm just going to tell you, like you can talk to me or Deborah, anybody on our team, any small group leader, whoever you feel comfortable with, and ask any question, and they're gonna tell you what they know, or they're gonna tell you, we'll figure it out together. But if you feel like you're ready to make that decision today, like all you need to understand is Jesus came to do this for you. That you've made mistakes that create a distance that you can't close on your own. And that all you need to start that relationship is belief. That's it. And you don't even have to have like it all figured out. All you really have to believe is that Jesus is enough. And you can start that relationship today. So with everybody kind of having their eyes closed, and this is like, I know it's a cliche for church, but it's about respecting boundaries and privacy as someone's processing. This is a big deal. So if that's you today and you feel like, I feel like God's calling me, I feel that pull to start a relationship with Jesus, I just want you to pray this really simple prayer. There's no power in the words. It's about what's in your heart. But you can say something like this. Jesus, I understand I can't do this on my own. And I now am beginning to understand that what I need is you. Not only do I recognize the distance that some of the choice I've made has created, but I need you to forgive those things. And I promise to try my best to learn to live a life that honors you. Amen. That's it. If that's something that you have considered, or that's the decision you made, like, come talk to one of our team members. Let us know. Not because we're trying to get in your business. We want to do two things. We want to celebrate, because that's amazing. That's awesome. But we also want to help you take next steps. We want to help you try to figure out what this actually looks like in your life, because it can be difficult sometimes. For everybody else, I'm glad you're here. So excited about what God's doing in your life and in our church. But we know there's more. So as you leave today, as we sing this last song, think about who God is calling you to disciple.
Again, thank you so much for joining us here at Parkside at Home. We're so thankful that you chose to watch, and we hope that you heard something that was inspiring or was a reminder to you that your story matters and is important and that God wants to use it. So our prayer for you this week is that He will give you the opportunity to share your story, which ultimately connects us to His story. Have a great week.